In this lesson, I want to walk you through how to create an online map with Leaflet. This is a relatively complex process for beginners, but once you follow the steps and get your head around how everything is working, it's actually not too bad. And the nice thing about it is that it provides you a bit more flexibility and functionality in building your web-based maps than something like Google Maps would. So to get us started, we need to do a couple things. You'll notice that I have a few files here in my directory. They're running a number. Once we open this, you'll see that they're reaching out to a number of servers across the internet. In order to look at our leaflet map, what we're going to need to do is use a virtual server. What a virtual server does is essentially sets up, as it sounds, a server on your computer. And this is a server that you can test your websites on. So if you're designing something in, let's say, PHP, you might want to run it off you have to run it off a virtual server if you want to test it out on your own computer. So what I've done is I've set myself up with a virtual server, and there's a number of different ways to do this. But I've used a program called XAMPP. I'm going to pull it up here for you so you can kind of see what it looks like. It's a pretty basic looking program. It's quite easy to use. It's free to download online. And once you set it up on your computer, then every time you want to test your websites, you just go into the Manage Servers panel and you click Start All. And as you can see right now, I have an Apache web server running and a MySQL database running if we were going to test something along those lines. And so this is all running in the background. And in order to look at your virtual server, what it's going to ask you to do is set up a location on your computer where files will be stored, and it's in that specific folder. In this case, it's htdocs, which I've dragged over here. It's in that folder of htdocs, and I have a number of things here, including a test folder here, which is where I'm storing these documents. It's in here where you can run files on your local server, and I'm going to show you what that looks like in just a moment. So here's what to do. We are going to open up a new panel in my browser, and you'll see I have a file here called basicmap.html. This is the file that we're going to be working with today. That is in my test folder inside the htdocs folder that I have here, and this is where my virtual server goes to look to run files. So in order to look at a virtual server, depending on your setup, you will type in localhost, and you can actually just press enter or your return key to see if it works. And you'll notice when this page pops up on my Mac, it says XAMPP is running. This is a good sign. This means my virtual server is set up and I can configure various things here. But I want to look not at my dashboard, but I want to look in my test folder, and I would like to look at the basic map document. So again, basic map is here. It's an HTML document. It's inside my test folder, which is being served by my server, my virtual server. And if I just hit return, I'm actually able to see the map that I've created there. So it's as simple as that to test your files. So I'm just going to drag this over here. We're going to keep this open because as we change the file or manipulate the file, we will want to test it. Okay, so back to here. So let's open the basic map HTML document and get a sense of what we're looking at here. So I have borrowed this code from Sarah Simpkin, who has a wonderful tutorial on how to use Leaflet and create data or add data to Leaflet. And many of those steps that she covers, we're going to be going over in this video here. And she based that on a tutorial by Andy Woodruff and Ryan Mullins. So I just want to give a shout out to them for setting up this basic framework that's very, very useful. So thinking about our HTML, there is, as usual, we have our head. And in our head, what we've dropped in is some style sheet data. And the style sheet data is linking us out to style sheets on a different server. And there is also a JavaScript source that we're linked out to here. And what the integrity does here is it checks to verify that we're grabbing the correct information from these two files. You don't have to worry about that for now. But the documentation on that is actually available at Leaflet if you wanted to have a look at it. There is also a JavaScript document that is in our own folder directory here. So you'll see that is right here, this jQuery. And so those are the files that are going to be used to run the JavaScript in the body of our document. So what we do is we move down into the body here after inputting all of this information that sets everything up for us. And what we've done is we've created a divider for our map. And this is where the map is going to go. The divider creates this placeholder for our map, and then we begin our JavaScript code. And if you're working in Leaflet, this is where you're going to do most of your work. So what we do in here is in the first setup here, what we want to do is customize our zoom level and our default coordinates. And you'll recognize these if you've been doing anything with GIS. These are latitude and longitude coordinates right here. And what they do is they set the center of the map for us. And then the zoom level here sets how closely we are zoomed into those coordinates. So if we look at these coordinates and we restart our page here, that is what the coordinates are doing, setting us up with. That is the zoom level that it's setting us up with. There's still a zoom here. We can zoom in and out, but the default, again, let's hit refresh, that's where it defaults to. So if we were to change these, let's change it to 5 instead of 15 and save that. And I'm already in my virtual, you can see I'm in the XAMPP htdocs folders, so I already have this file in there, so I can test it in this folder already. But if I go back to my browser and click refresh, now we're way zoomed out. We're very, very far zoomed out. So if we change that to, let's say, 18 instead of what our original was 15, and save that and hit refresh, we're zoomed much more closely in there. So you can see why I chose 15. I could have just as easily have chosen something like 16, and in that case, we'll be a little further out. And rather than having the edges of our map show, if I do it like this, the whole map will be shown in the viewer here. So that makes some sense. And then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to just change this coordinate. So let's say that we change our coordinate here from 55, and instead let's make that 40. You'll note, and I've saved that, if we hit refresh, it moves us to a different location on the globe entirely here. So if we zoom out, we'll see, I think we're in Spain. Yes, we're in Spain. So that is what those numbers do right there. So you can center and set your zoom on any location on the globe using that. Then what we want to do is we want to add the background, what's called a tile layer on our map. So this is actually the background map. And we don't have this in our own file directory, but rather we are asking the system to reach out to a document on CartoDB and pull that document, and this is the format for that tile layer, and we want it to load that tile layer for us. And this is what that tile layer looks like right here. And then we want to make sure that we have the proper attributions for anything that we're using from somebody else's work. As you'll notice, I kept the attribution up here for Sarah Simpkin, Andy Woodruff, and Ryan Mullins. So we want to make sure that also in our maps, the proper attributions are made. And so we do that by using a standard attribution framework. It's nice to put the any copyright information in there, and that will actually show up at the bottom right of our map. So you'll see that OpenStreetMap and CartoDB are right here. This sets our maximum zoom, our minimum zoom for the map, and the z-index here says that if I have it set to 1, that means that that is the base map. That's the bottom map. Any layers on top of that, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever we layer on top of that, they will layer up from our base map here. And that's what that does right here. You can pretty much just copy and paste this information, and it would be pretty much the same for any map. Then the next thing that we're doing is we're pulling a document, what's called a GeoJSON document. This is a framework for mapping information according to geographical coordinates, very similar in ways to KML, which we've looked at in a previous lecture. And all it does is it gives latitude and longitude data for attribute information in a database. Just like any GIS system is effectively a database that maps rows of that database in latitude and longitude coordinates, GeoJSON is doing the same thing. So this could be done in a different context with a comma-separated value spreadsheet, or using KML, but in this case we are using this JavaScript format here. And you don't need to know much about any of this other information here, but the important thing for our purposes is this is where our GeoJSON data is being stored. I have it set, and if we look at our file structure here, it's map2 GeoJSON. It's right here. I'm not going to open that right now because we are going to create that information someplace else. Okay. And then finally, so that's pulling our GeoJSON data and putting it into our map. And those are actually, if we look at our map, those are the points on the map. So let's scroll in here to Edinburgh. And my GeoJSON file is designating 3 points on my map to look at. And finally, we have a second tile layer, and this is loading a tile layer from Map Warper. You will remember from a previous lecture how to take historical maps and georectify them to match modern maps. Map Warper can store those maps for us, does store those maps for us, and it gives a number of export options in Map Warper. And one of the export options is this format right here, which we can use in Leaflet. So again, we're not putting the map in our own file structure. We are pulling the map that we've already created in Map Warper from Map Warper. And just like in the previous attribution, we want to make sure that Map Warper gets credit, and in this case, the user is getting credit for having done the georectification on the map. Again, we can set our maximum zoom, our minimum zoom. Our z-index is set to 2, meaning this is our second layer that we're creating as far as tile layers go. And then I've put in here the option to set opacity. Opacity is how strongly you can see in this case, our historical map over the uh, first tile layer over here. So this is the map that we're pulling from CartoDB. This is the map we're pulling from MapWarper. And you can see there is zero opacity here. You cannot see through this map at all. So if we want to change the opacity, we can do that. We can set the opacity to, let's say, 0.4 opacity. And if I save that and refresh this map, you'll notice here that you can begin seeing through the map here. And depending on what our background map is, opacity of 4 might be fine. This is a very light map, so it's hard to see through this map. But if this were a dark map, we might be seeing the image underneath coming through a little bit better. But even here, you can see the oval crescent here in both the historic map and the contemporary map. Okay. So let's go back to our file, our basic map file. That is all you need to know for basic map file. You can make lots of adjustments. You can do a lot of work once you understand JavaScript. But to put a basic map on the web using Leaflet, this is the core of what you need to know. So there's just a few adjustments that you need to make. You can make adjustments in where you which maps you pull from, for example, and that is in this layer here. So you could change where you're pulling from your maps. You can also change your historical maps here, and of course your data sets will change from map to map as well. So now that we understand the basic structure of our file, let's create a GeoJSON file.